Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone. I am Pasta Jardula.
I'm Fiorella.
And Johnny Sue is still spinning on those ones and twos, and today we have a special guest on the couch via satellite. Our man, Nick Brana's here. You know him. How you doing, Nick?
Hey, doing great, Pasta. Great to be with you, too.
Man, thanks
What
for coming on the show. You know, we've been talking about having you on for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
We got a lot of questions, how you got your recognition, how everybody knew your name. Nick Brana's here with us, so let's just jump on into it. Go ahead, Fiorella.
Actually, you were gonna start off first.
I have the first question.
Yes.
I forgot. She gave me the first question. I got so excited that you were coming on. She's like, you get the first question. Awesome, Nick. So, how is the Movement for a People's Party? How is it different from any other third party out there? And how do you plan to be successful enough to break through the duopoly? And more or less, the fact that it's really hard to get ballot access as a president for a third party. Go right ahead.
Yeah. All the big questions, all in one. And so one of the things that we're looking to do differently is that we believe that this needs to be a working class party. That means across the board. That means that you are invited in, whether you are, vote for the right half of the duopoly, the left half of the duopoly, Republicans, people who self-identify as conservatives. Something that's not really known is that, like, people who, that we're all affected by the same economic issues, whether you're progressive, conservative, anywhere you are on the political spectrum right now, everybody's fed up with these two parties. Everybody's affected by the inability to afford health care, by political corruption, by massive, like, Gilded Age level inequality. And so all of those things are something that need to be people from across to come together. And you see that kind of thing emerging now with this mass self-identify. So that's one of the areas that we're looking to be different. Another one is, of course, we're obviously looking to take zero corporate money. We don't do that. That needs to be a line that needs to be held. Unfortunately, it's getting blurred in the progressive movement right now, but you cannot be accountable to the people unless you are not taking corporate money and you are people powered. And Bernie's two campaigns proved that it's possible. $230 million raised the first time off of small dollar donations, $200 million the second time. So that's possible as well. As far as ballot access, it's an absolute myth that that's not possible. Like, for example, the best argument here, I think, is that everyone says, oh, well, the Green Party is so small and marginal and disorganized. And there's some truth to that, unfortunately. But they managed to get ballot access in almost every state. Like in 2016, 44 states, 3 states that were write-in. And the Libertarian Party gets ballot access in every state, too. And the Green Party only has about $300,000 as an annual budget. And like about 3 or 4 full-time like staff equivalents. And so that's really nothing. If you talk about bringing the resources of the progressive movement or of millions of Americans, then you can absolutely blast through the 1 million signatures that it takes to get on the ballot across the country. For example, in Florida, for the Felons Restorations Initiative, 1.4 million signatures. That one state, that one initiative. So it can absolutely be done.
Wow. Those are good answers. But I'm also like a little bit, you've been around since 2016. So in this time, why has Movement for the People's Party not been credited like the Green Party or the Libertarian Party and not built like the infrastructure, I say, in that time? Because a lot of people would have been like hungry to jump in on that maybe this time and like kind of have a candidate come out. But in 2016 we were still learning, but by 2020 we should have known better. And I think with Bernie Sanders and the campaign went, if something had been set up, I think people would have really like jumped on it right away. What do you plan specifically to make this happen? Because obviously, regarding voting, it's already difficult enough for people to vote, and they put all these traps. What does Movement as a party plan to do to surpass that?
Yeah. So what kinds of voting traps are you referring to?
I'm talking about voter suppression. I'm talking about you guys not being included in certain debates. I'm talking about just like the usual third party stuff that people
Right.
like the Green Party and the Libertarian Party have to deal with, because if people want to vote for you, they want to make sure that at least we get something out of it. Like there just hasn't been the infrastructure in the Green Party or the Peace and Freedom Party or the Libertarian Party alone. Why Movement for the People's Party then? What's the difference in the structure that's going to allow people to really like be like, okay, this is a serious party, we can make this happen?
Right. Well, there are structural differences, but the differences that are the most important actually is one of context. In 2016, unfortunately, people were not ready. The progressive movement was not ready. We made the arguments. A lot of us, myself, I left the Democratic Party. I left a years-long career in the Democratic Party. Wrote an article actually first endorsing Jill Stein. That was me leaving the Democrats. But the progressive movement chose to follow Bernie in reforming the party, in attempting to, and we've seen how that turned out. Obviously, it has not succeeded. Now it's very different. Now you have a second rigged presidential election, a global pandemic, an economic financial meltdown, and now you have a revolt against systemic racism and police brutality. And so the conditions are entirely different. And the willingness, even before this last crisis that's been layered upon all of the others of this revolt that's taking place right now, people were a lot more willing to consider and entertain a major new party. And you saw that in the way that Our Revolution Los Angeles recently joined us. Our Revolution Oregon's going to hold a statewide call with us. We've been talking to myself and Jerry Perez of ORLA have been talking to Our Revolutions across the country, almost nonstop. And so there's there is a realization now. And the other thing that I'll say is that generally, like when you look into our own history and when you look abroad about how new parties have been successful as breakthrough parties and not just kind of, at maintaining a small percentage for a long time, is they tend to be new parties because they come with a sense of possibility and hope and inspiration. And, with a brand that hasn't been kind of like associated with being marginalized, unfortunately, or with being kind of small or minor. And so you saw it, for example, in the 1850s when the new Republican Party, abolitionists, broke off from the Whig Party after the Whig Party elites passed a pro-slavery platform. And they were, the base of the Whig Party was already abolitionist. And so they said, to hell with you, to the party elites. They started the Republican Party. Within 2 years, it had gained a foothold in Congress. Within 4 years, it had taken a majority in Congress. And then within 6 years, they had taken both houses of Congress and elected Abraham Lincoln president. And so that's how fast things can happen when you reach a kind of tipping point. In Mexico, there was an example in 2018, too. Progressives got tired of trying to reform the two parties that had essentially dominated that country for 100 years since the Mexican Revolution. And they left the establishment parties. They formed the new Morena party. And within 4 years, they had elected Lopez Obrador president of the country, who's been called the Bernie Sanders of Mexico. He's not perfect, but he's a hell of a lot better than what we have here and what they used to have over there.
Mhm.
And they also swept out, they took the two establishment parties, the leading ones in both houses of the legislature, the national legislature, and they took majorities in both houses of the national legislature and in majorities of the governorships. So it's like, compare that to what we've been doing here, which is like in 2018, it was only two progressives who unseated establishment members of Congress, Democrats who kicked, the Democrats out of their House seats in the primaries. It was AOC and Ayanna Pressley. Like, compare what happened in Mexico, compare what happened with the Republican Party to that. That is wholesale system change and party change, and that's what a political revolution looks like. And that's what we're going to do, as a movement for a People's Party.
Okay. So you talked about having these conversations with Our Revolution leaders and possibly absorbing Our Revolution. But most of the people I know from Our Revolution are gung-ho Medicare for All, Green New Deal people. how do you get those people to open up to, say, people like myself who consider myself to be very progressive, but for me, it's all about my civil liberties, ending regime change wars, and more importantly, election integrity. And the second part of that question is, where does the Movement for a People's Party stand on election integrity?
We think that it's going to take a movement, a large election integrity movement, unlike what we've seen so far, in order to be able to get any progress on it. And the best way to do that, we think, is because it's obviously a major problem. I mean, we've seen the results that don't add up. We saw it in 2016. We saw it in 2020. It's been really well reported, and we think that it's going to take a movement that is invested. If you get a movement invested in a new party, for example, that is demanding representation and then is encountering these things like election fraud and election rigging, then you're going to have millions of people who are going to really want to, I think, put up a fight against that in a way that you haven't had, and in a way that the election integrity movement right now just has not been able to, unfortunately, put up.
So can you explain what the structure of your party would be? Because the Green Party has its own structure, the Democratic Party has its own structure and its platform. One of my biggest fears as a socialist is to have a very centralized sort of party where the structure relies heavily on one or two people, and it doesn't, the power doesn't expand to the people. And I don't want to repeat the same mistake with any new party, which is why I'm apprehensive about every single party out there, even the Green Party. So what is actually the structure, and how will you avoid going that route where you become like a very centralized sort of like, kind of authoritative structure?
Yeah, well, rightfully so, to be skeptical, because the examples that we have of parties out there are horrible ones. The Democratic and the Republican parties, for example, what we need to get away from in those parties is the fact that you do not elect your leadership in those parties. We did not get to vote for Tom Perez or Keith Ellison. It was the super delegates, the DNC members got to vote, and a whole bunch of them are corporate lobbyists or they're consultants. And so they have a direct financial interest to run the party essentially as a committee of corporations, which is how I see the Democratic Party. And the same thing is true in the Republican Party. And the same thing is true also with the platform. Like, for example, in 2016, we engaged in the platform fight. Now, I suppose some progressives are still engaged in the platform fight, but a lot less enthusiastically and in much smaller numbers because they've learned that it doesn't matter. But in 2016, just as a sign of how meaningless the Democratic Party platform was, well, first of all, it's not binding. And so, and they still fought us tooth and nail over something which was ultimately symbolic. The Clinton campaign did. But then what happened in 2017 was really revealing 1 year later, is that the Democratic Party took the platform that had been approved by the delegates and they just threw it out. And they passed this thing called the better deal.
Yeah.
And they said, this is our platform now, and this is what we're going to run on. And so obviously, there's no respect there for the popular will. It needs to be the people who are designing the platform. It needs to be the people who are funding the party. And it needs to be the people who are electing the leadership. And the leadership needs to be accountable. And there need to be processes even for recalling the leadership if that's necessary. And that's what we're looking to implement as the Movement for a People's Party as well. In the People's Party, all of those things have been in our DNA as a movement from the beginning in order to prevent that.
What is right now? Who is the leadership of your party right now?
The way that we do it right now is we elect coordinators on an annual basis to the different working groups that we have. So on a national level, we have 8 different working groups. We have action, arts, media messaging, finance, and organizing, and others. Regenerative culture, that's another thing we're trying to do differently, is create a very intentional culture in the movement of taking care of each other and reflecting what we want to see outside, inside in our movement. And so it is we have 2 coordinators for each of the working groups. They're elected annually. Our next election is in March when we merged with Burn the DNC. And that is when they're elected from the working groups up to a coordinator circle. And I'm really grateful for the people who are there because they work day in and day out on MPP. It's a big responsibility.
And what is your position in the Movement for the People's Party?
National coordinator.
National coordinator. Okay.
Yeah.
And
I
these people get elected
the
too?
media. I coordinate media and messaging.
Okay, awesome. And like everybody gets to be evaluated and then elected or reelected. How do people run?
Within the working groups. And so people run within the working groups, and that's how people will be selected. We used to have more of a steering committee model, which is more of like I guess a typical nonprofit model. And, we decided with our membership that it was important to, have a really decentralized and horizontal system. And so we adopted this model, which is called self-organizing systems. We borrowed it from Extinction Rebellion.
Do you have any veto or removal power yourself, or is it just all completely by election?
No, it's by election, and each coordinator has one vote.
That's awesome.
On the coordinator circle. Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys have an election integrity committee?
Sorry?
Do you have an election integrity committee?
We have an election integrity circle.
You do?
And so within the working groups, we have circles that do work within them. Yeah, we have a structured document that we have on our website. And so you're welcome to go look, and everyone is welcome.
Yeah,
to go
at the end, just remind us what that website is so we can tell people to go check it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Peoplesparty.org.
You got it. So Bernie Sanders led a movement that was taken out from the inside, technically. He has to be accountable because he makes the decisions at the end of the day. But we did see what happened with all these institutional players and what they did. Not mentioning any names, Chuck Rocha. Tell me more about what you saw. Jeff Weaver. Well, tell me more about what you saw in 2016, because you had box seats for that one, as compared to 2020 from your perspective.
Yeah. I was on the 2016 campaign. My role was National Political Outreach Coordinator, which was lobbying the superdelegates for Bernie, helping him get endorsements from local elected officials, and then helping plan the convention towards the end, and then helping him found Our Revolution also. In 2016, there was a divide between the kind of more professional campaign staff, and then the kind of movement activists, the people who were there because they really believed in it. And I suppose I fell in this camp, but I identified with this camp and kind of worked with them. But Jeff Weaver was definitely in the establishment Politico camp, and he very much mismanaged the campaign. Very unfortunate, to the point at which the staff that Bernie chose to go to Our Revolution actually demanded that Jeff not come to Our Revolution. And Bernie and Jane promised that would happen, and they reneged on that promise after we went to Our Revolution, which was unfortunate. And then in 2020, it was just it was kind of galling to see Weaver and some of the more establishment members of the campaign. What they tried to do at Our Revolution, you both probably know, is they tried to take big money and then spend it on kind of more establishment candidates through a C4, not tell the grassroots that they were going to do that, do it all through independent expenditures and ads. So that was not at all what the real true believers and activist members of the staff had in mind. We were we're going to build a network of really progressive candidates. We're going to do deep organizing in communities. It's not just going to be all ad money that goes to consultants. And so it was galling to see that happen again, and it's really unfortunate to see it actually spreading even beyond Weaver this time. And so Weaver, obviously, he created with Chuck Rocha, they created that super PAC that they named, Future to Believe in First, just so they wanted to add insult to injury. But then to see Justice Democrats, also do it, it's just so unfortunate. And, I think it's the ultimate example of what our fate, the sad fate that awaits us in the Democratic Party. Yeah. It's how quickly the incrementalism takes hold.
Just really quick on a quick follow-up. Then, Nick, you had a seat to this. He can't be oblivious to this right here. This doesn't line up with his messaging that we've seen consistently for 30, 40 years. Do you believe he was threatened or something to get in line? Because, once again, I was willing to get back out in the streets with him this time, thinking that he was just playing a little bit nice to take over. But we see all this unfold, and you tell us about Jeff Weaver. It doesn't make sense to me. Why?
The buck stops with Bernie in the end. Bernie's ultimately the one who's responsible. He makes the staffing choices. He chooses to empower Weaver in this way and others in this way. And so I think unfortunately, Bernie doesn't have the theory of change that we thought he had. I think that's it, because Bernie called him, he said he was running as like organizer in chief, and he said that in 2020. When I get to the White House, he said, it's not going to be enough that I have all the right policies and that I won the presidency. I'm going to need millions of people in the streets, and yet every time that Bernie had an opportunity to like actually bring people out into the streets, like when the pandemic hit, okay, like or organize people. I mean, organize people for, even if you can't bring people out in the streets, then organize people for like a general strike, organize people for like rent strikes. He didn't do any of that. And the time when he should have like most been organizer in chief, he didn't even like the staff, like it was like, I think it was more than 1,000 staffers had to sign an open letter to him, just asking him to continue the organization and not disband like the organization of the campaign, and to like transfer the Slacks and the email list to Our Revolution, which he never did. And so I'm really disappointed. I'm really disappointed, honestly, because I feel like he could be doing more.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, like, it was also the pandemic. It was also knowing Bernie's character. I agree with you. I don't think he's the revolutionary at that point right now in his life. I think he's tired. I think he let us down in a certain way. But I also think what you said is, he said, you guys have to get out in the streets and do this. And honestly, right now, that shows us more than ever that we can't rely on a politician, which is why we can't also rely on, on parties. The whole system is so messed up, because you have someone like Bernie Sanders running for president, somebody with such a clean record, somebody who doesn't have anything. He was so too nice, right? For the environment, for the climate that we're in right now. You needed somebody that would punch back. And ultimately, we didn't see that from him, because I think he's not the revolutionary we thought. He's more of a reformist. And, those of us who supported him, he was our compromise to a lot of us. I mean, a lot of us are far to the left of Bernie. And that's something that I think a lot of people didn't realize. And, we had our certain expectations, and I agree. I the whole Jeff Weaver thing, it's puzzling, but I also think it's something about a loyalty, knowing him since the very beginning. Bernie Sanders has that sort of thing with Biden too. I can't for the life of me understand it. And I genuinely believe he believes Trump is the most dangerous president in modern history. I genuinely believe he believes that. And so to me, though, the biggest question is, what are we going to do as progressives? Because what I'm seeing is, if Bernie Sanders' presidency, or if his presidential run can be co-opted, if Our Revolution, certain chapters, Massachusetts, certain chapters everywhere have been co-opted by people who were pro-Buttigieg, pro-Warren. If all of these movements and these organizations can be co-opted, what will you do to stop the movement for the People's Party from being co-opted in that same way? Because right now we're all on hyper alert. We're all like, we don't even want PACs at this point. We're all kind of weary about throwing in money, effort to something when we're afraid, because the system is so corrupt that it's going to get co-opted. What can we do to stop that?
Well, we don't even think that electoral politics is enough, and it's on its own either. We took Bernie at his word, and we agreed with him when he said he wanted to be organizer in chief, and when he said that you need millions of people out in the streets, and so that's why one of our working groups, one of our 8, is action, and another one is regenerative culture, which goes with action and works in kind of an action cycle. And so we believe in actually being in communities, working with people there, and like developing roots, participate now in mutual aid, taking direct action, civil disobedience, those kinds of things. We believe that, and issue fights on the local level too. That needs to contrast with what the Democratic and the Republican parties are now, which is they're shells. They don't want members. They don't have members. They don't want members because it challenges their power base. And so we, as the Movement for a People's Party, as kind of we've developed this theory of change, we've said that it's not enough to just be creating a new party. We have to redefine what a party is. It has to be in the streets. It has to be, really be building solidarity with people locally. It needs to also, be in how it's going to be accountable and how it's going to stay accountable. That needs to be structurally embedded, that it cannot take corporate money. And also these rules about selecting leadership, holding leadership accountable, maintaining decentralization, all of that needs to be codified in the party. And so that's something that we've held to firm, and moving towards the founding convention, we do want to codify those things. Because it's those structural solutions that are going to prevent that from happening.
Right. The foundation, so to speak. I just have one question, and then I'll let Pasta take another stab. So I'm trying to phrase it in a certain way. What do you believe we can do right now in this very moment? Because right now, seeing the protests, we're seeing the riots, we're seeing general strike, and you talk about the structure of your party. What can we do? What can you do as an emerging party right now to kind of build a sort of movement, right? Because there is a movement right now. I mean, there's Black Lives Matter is out there, but I feel like we need to tie it one step further into our economic issues, because people are also just anxious, they're uncertain, they don't know what's happening next, and they are kind of desperate for somebody to take leadership. So is there a plan for Movement for the People's Party to be doing anything right now amidst this crisis?
There is, and we just put it up to a vote for our membership. And so it hasn't been decided on, because the membership needs to, we need them to weigh in and say, do we want to do this or not? But what our action working group has proposed, and what we think is a fantastic plan, what I do at least, is that we want to take action at every member of Congress and Senator's House directly on June 27th, Saturday, June 27th. That's about 3-4 weeks from now. And bring protests there, and that it be a response to the pandemic and police brutality and systemic racism. And that's what we're aiming to do. We put out a platform of demands, so to speak, that we will go and deliver to them in person at their homes. And that is Medicare for all, universal basic income, keeping people on payrolls. Also, I have it right here. A universal basic income of $2,000 cash payments, rent and mortgage, suspending rent and mortgages, and suspending all debt payments for student loans and credit cards, and debt payments in general. And so these are policies that both Bernie Sanders has he put them out in his original coronavirus response package, most of them. And they're also ones that, for example, some of the progressive members of Congress have united around, but more importantly, movements have united around them. And they're things that people desperately need now. You can't take people's jobs away when they were living already, 80%, 80% of people were living paycheck to paycheck. Half the country less than $500 in savings. You can't take people's jobs away and then expect them to continue paying rent or continue affording food. And that's why you have the travesty now of a third of families in the United States with children cannot afford food, afford food. And so I did an interview yesterday, and I called the United States a failed state. the U.S. is a failed state, because the definition of that now is that you in political science is that it's a government that fails to provide basic needs for its people, you
Yeah.
know. And then you have this combined with the fact that there is no end in sight. There is no end in sight. Like, there's no knowledge of when this is going to end. 40% of businesses, small businesses or more, are thought of they could go bankrupt. And so you see the largest wave of corporate consolidation in American history, along with the largest upward transfer of wealth in American history. So that's why what we've proposed is, we need to protest the police for their brutality and the racism and the white supremacy they've shown. But we also need to turn and point to who the ultimate culprits are here. And it's the people in our government. It's the
Yeah.
people who have enabled and created this system. They've enabled Wall Street to pillage us. They made it possible. They made themselves subsidiaries of corporations. And so that's why we're proposing that we target all representatives, senators, and the White House, all elected officials who have some, and we deliver this demands, and we basically affix it to their doors or their gated communities or whatever it is, but we're going to bring it right to them.
Okay, so you addressed a lot of economic issues there, social issues right now. But at times of crisis, our government seizes on our civil liberties. Right now with the Earn It Act, which they're kind of pushing through, they want the government to decide what is suitable, what could be put on the internet, what messages. They want to control their narrative. And that really goes at the stem, at the heart of organizing, because they're going to cut your information and put forth their narrative. Is there any guardians at the gate in the movement for a People's Party when it comes to these issues like right now? Because this is something serious we have to look at.
These are in our platform. Abolishing mass surveillance, that's in our platform. And so, yes, absolutely. I mean, the whole fake news meme was a response to our success organizing online in 2016. So yes, and we absolutely oppose that kind of information control, the crackdown that we've seen, on YouTube, that we've seen on social media, the shadow banning. We feel it too.
Okay. You have another question? I got one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so in 2016, there were a lot of people who were somewhat in Bernie's camp. Or for one reason or another, they kind of drifted away. You being one of them, another person being Tim Canova. Then they kind of gotten a lot of what I call attacks from neo-progressives, from maybe some hardcore Bernie bros that kind of said that like Nick Brana was just like an instigator. He's just in this for himself, and he's just skimming off the top. What do you say to those critics out there who are kind of throwing that kind of narrative your way?
MPP is an all-volunteer organization. I've given the last 3.5 years of my life to doing this. And that included putting my own financial security on the line. I can hardly afford healthcare anymore. The cost of my healthcare has gone up $100 like per month past 3 years. And this last year, Kaiser Permanente, I was already on like the minimum catastrophic level. And Kaiser Permanente decided, we're going to eliminate your catastrophic level, and we're going to move you up to like the bronze or whatever the one above that is. And it costs more, and we're not going to tell you. And so then, and by the time you find out, it'll be too late. You either, pay the more expensive rate, or you don't have healthcare.
Wow.
And so why is Nick Brana doing this then? What personally drives Nick Brana to do what he's doing?
What I think it's what I saw at our revolution, because the experience at our revolution that I had, we were all so excited to go in there and create this kind of organization that was really gonna fight, and to continue Bernie's legacy, and to see Bernie Sanders and Jane want to start taking big money, billionaire money, just weeks, even days after the end of the convention and the end of the campaign, it really kind of made me realize or confront that if the Democratic Party can do this to Bernie Sanders, then it can do it to anyone.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party cannot be saved And this is something that I meant to bring up earlier, is that, why do we see Bernie doing these things? Why do we see AOC coming into Congress 2 years ago saying she's going to primary a whole bunch of corporate Democrats, saying she's going to create a corporate free caucus? Fast forward 2 years, and she's given up on the corporate free caucus. She's barely primarying, Democrats in Congress anymore.
Yeah.
Bernie, the only one who he seems to be able to challenge is Dan Lipinski. He doesn't challenge anyone else, and so he doesn't endorse the primaries. And so it was seeing the system. I got into Democratic politics, I suppose, rather naively, thinking that this is the left party in America, and this is where I can make change and I can participate in making change. And, I think, like so many people, I've been disabused of that notion since then. But that's what I got into it in the first place. And I feel like, I've just continued that. It's just my information and what I believe it'll take to accomplish that has changed.
So I just have one last question. What does the party ideologically identify as? Is there no label? Are you just focused on, the people? Do you have any influence from, the socialists or independents, libertarians, a little bit of everything? What's the ideological stance? Because a lot of people are trying to talk about uniting behind a party. So if you're open to people who are a little bit not necessarily as far left as, like a socialist might be, what exactly is the motto for that?
We're describing ourselves as progressive populists now.
Progressive populist, okay.
Yeah. Because, and even I think there has to be a conversation, like within the movement, even about whether we want to describe ourselves as progressive, because when you look at polls of how Americans feel, you have like large majorities that want a new party. You have large majority, you have like a large plurality at this point that's independent. You have large majorities that support progressive policies, everything that Bernie ran on, basically. But then you also have, kind of paradoxically, polls that show that when you ask people to self-identify in the US, like, what do you think of yourself as, what would you ideologically classify yourself as? People, the median is center right. And so the same people who are saying, what are you ideologically? I'm conservative, I'm center right, are saying, but then you ask them about the policies. Oh, well, what do you think about Medicare for all? And they say, hell yeah. What do you think about a universal basic income? Hell yeah. Free public college. Yes. And so there's a need to run on the issues above the labels, because the issues are what build the coalition. The issues are what bring people aboard. The labels are what they use to divide us, and what they use to, create like these schemas. Everybody says, oh, I know what that means. I don't need to look into it. And this was like so exemplified in some moments in Bernie's campaign in 2016 and 2020, like when he spoke at Liberty University, one of the most conservative colleges in the country, which is in my state, Virginia, and he got applause there. And then when he spoke in 2020 at the Fox Town Hall, and he talked about Medicare for all, and the Fox anchors thought that it was going to be like a gotcha question, but instead they celebrated him for wanting to get off employer-based health insurance and over to Medicare for all. So it goes to show, like, when you talk, that's one of the things that I feel like, Bernie, obviously he identified as socialist, democratic socialist, but I feel like it's one of the things that he generally got right, because he did focus on the issues. And I feel like that's where the coalition is to be built. And in 2012, in 2016, actually, there was that poll I'm sure you guys saw that was, if it had been Bernie against Trump, it would have been plus 12 Bernie. It would have biggest landslide
both times.
ever.
Honestly,
I don't think last time. I think he was too far gone. But that's a discussion.
Another debate.
That's another debate. Okay, so listen, when it comes to economic and financial issues and foreign policy, those are the two, I think, misunderstood by the general population, because then a lot of people don't understand finance, and a lot of people don't understand what's going on around the world. So Jesus left his super chat for a couple bucks, and he wants to know who's the economic advisor for the People's Party, and I want to know who the foreign policy advisor is for the People Party. Start with the economic. Go ahead, Nick.
Mhm. Yeah, we don't have kind of a board of policy advisors so far. We've taken our platform largely from Bernie and from movements, and so we haven't, we don't have like those people yet, but we want that.
Okay. Monotalk left a super chat, wants to know, was making a statement for you, Nick, here. I don't know how you want to take this one. It says, parties are no longer the solution, Nick. Voteheard.org. I don't know, but you know.
There's like a movement to eliminate parties, but I don't think we're there yet because people are just not organized. Like we need to have some sort of structure and organization is what I think the answer to that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think you can't cede either like realm, you can't give up electoral politics entirely, and if the majority of Americans are saying they want a new party, why shouldn't we do that?
Right.
And too often there's like this black and white thinking in the progressive movement, but also in the country in general that is like, we have to do just one thing. And there's like no room for like anything else, and it's like, no, we could do both. We can take action, we can take direct action, and we can build an electoral alternative. And we can have like a multi-pronged, attack on the system to bring it down. Because honestly, nobody really knows what's going to work. Nobody really knows like what's going to be the ultimate combination. But if we're doing everything, then we have the ability to actually see what is getting traction. And I don't even think that you have to do, I spoke earlier about like the movement party philosophy that we have of combining direct action with electoralism. I don't even think you have to choose, within one organization. I think you can do both. And the fact that we're about to hopefully go to every member of Congress's House as an aspiring political party that's going to get ballot access next year, I think that speaks to it. We can do both, and we should do both.
Do you guys have a candidate like on the realm that who's the first candidate that's going to run, or is it going to just happen with a bunch of small seats at one time? What do you think that's going to look like?
I don't know. That hasn't been decided, okay. And that's something that the membership would also have to decide. There will be, there will be some strategic conversations that have to be had too about, do we do like the scattershot approach where it's like you try to run in as many different places as possible, at many different levels as possible, or do you kind of run more strategically for certain seats, that you believe that you can win, and try to use that as a springboard to a 2024 presidential election. So like, I don't have everything figured out. We don't have everything figured out. But as like a movement, we can what we do know is I believe it's enough to act on. And that is that the majority of Americans are fed up with this system. They want a new party. They want out of it. They have no confidence in government anymore. 12% confidence in Congress. From in the last 50 years, from 80% trusting in government to do the right thing down to 20%. So like now, people are ready for something different. And I believe that we as a movement can build it together.
Do you have anything else coming up that you want to let the audience know, and also where we can find you?
So I would definitely encourage folks to join us on our national call this Thursday. And that's where we're going to talk about any kind of actions that we're going to take if the membership is on board with going to members of representatives and senators' houses and the White House, and delivering our demands, our pandemic emergency response demands, and our systemic racism demands, police brutality demands. Then we'll be talking about that on that call, and we'll be discussing how that can happen in essentially every congressional district. And so you can join that national call Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, by going to peoplesparty.org and going to the events section, and you'll see national call there.
Awesome. All right, Nick, thank you very much. We have a super chat.
Yeah, he says maybe any real progressive should change party affiliation and tell Mama Bear to suck it. In other words, Luis Brooks is with you, Nick Brana. Johnny, did you have anything else you wanted to say before you get out of here? Nick, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. For Pasta Jardula,
Urella,
Johnny Sue on the ones and twos. Go check Nick out.
We'll be back.
Peace.
come out.
Great talking to you guys. Anytime. Would love
Thank
to
you,
come
Nick.
back.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
Peace.
See you guys.
Bye.